Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we are going to hold one of our chats on the past programs. As always, my name is Nicole Carpenter. I'm the Programs Director here at the Museum for History and Culture in Westport. As always, we ask that you support the program however you can, whether that is through a donation to the museum. We do have a suggested donation of $5. But we do ask that you support however you can during this difficult time. That also includes liking and following us on social media. On Facebook and Twitter, you can follow us at Westport History, and on Instagram at Westport History Museum. During our program, if you have any questions for our guest or for the museum, please enter them in the chat box and I will monitor those comments and questions, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of our program tonight. So we are very kindly joined by Michael Angelicola, stone carver and master mason with over 30 years of experience. Michael specializes in historic restoration, custom stonework, and stone carving, which includes broken historic gravestones that are beyond repair, as well as carving new stones. And I understand that all of this carving is done by hand. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. So our first question that I thought we would dive into tonight is, where did you start your craft? What inspired you to begin restoring and producing these replacement stones?
Well, I always had an interest in the historic cemeteries, and then I started volunteering in them with, historical societies, cemetery committees, and we would do such things as cleaning the stones and standing them back up, the ones that were leaning or fell over, and I would see these beautiful old stones and think, this is all somebody has to show they ever existed, and just the folk art on a lot of the old 1700 stones. And I'm like, I'm able to do this. If I could make one that looks just like it, and this one is beyond repair. And, I volunteered to do a couple at first and kind of escalated from there. Word got out and just kind of spread.
And where did you learn to create these stones? You said that you volunteered to create them, but where did that skill come from in the first place?
I started in the masonry trade as a laborer when I was 15 and learned the trade. I didn't learn stone carving, that was self-taught, but I knew I wanted to evolve and do something a little bit more with the stone than just laying stone or splitting stone. And I would practice. I would start out with house numbers and bird baths and benches for people, and little things like that. And then I kind of graduated onto replicating architectural carvings and pieces. And then when I saw, I felt confident enough that I would be able to do a gravestone, and I practiced a little bit and then volunteered, and that's what started my career in stone carving, or gravestone carving anyway.
So historically, stones, if anyone has ever taken any of the museum's walking tours, they'll know, or hopefully will have learned, that gravestones in the past have been made from a variety of materials. Some of them are schist, sandstone, and then later we move into marble and granite. What kind of stones do you typically work in?
Whatever stone I'm working on depends on the material, because you try to match the original material if you can. I've done schist, brownstone, which is sandstone, marble, other slate, but not so much slate up my neck of the woods. A lot of it is marble and brownstone.
Do you enjoy working in one type more than another, or is it the joy of actually just working with the original material?
I like brownstone. I prefer brownstone. So everybody has their preference, and I enjoy all the stone I do, whether it be schist or marble, but I prefer sandstone.
Is it from the ease of working with it, or just personal preference?
Just personal preference. I mean, there is different types of sandstone, aka brownstone, in this area, and some of the stuff from Portland, has a lot of layers in it, so it kind of tends to delaminate and has bigger aggregate. But, if I could find the stuff from East Long Meadow, a lot of it is reclaimed, and I bring it to a fabrication shop. They'll slice it for me to, into slabs. From there, I'll shape it and lay out the design and start carving.
And what challenges do these stones pose, and opportunities as well? Is there something unique to these stones that make them hard or easy to work with?
It depends. All the material isn't created equal. I mean, I can't get, say, one piece of marble and be able to carve just say a willow and urn in it. It's just the makeup of it isn't right for it. Where one type of marble, I might be able to go deep relief and just say do flowers that are half-inch thick, where other marbles are just going to chip away and kind of make a mess of things. So it poses a challenge knowing the marble, knowing what you're looking for in the marble itself.
And I know that probably most of our audience members aren't familiar with the different iconography and the different types of things that you can carve out of stone. Are there things in particular that you look for in a stone to create a certain type of image? If you were going to do a willow and urn, is there a specific thing that you're looking for in the stone, or do you realize that as you start to work with it?
I'll usually know by inspecting the stone itself, but sometimes it can be deceiving, and you got to kind of get a sample piece to practice with. Got to kind of get a feel for it. You're looking for consistency in the grains, not a lot of veining, just the makeup of the marble itself. I keep referring to marble, but whether it be any stone that I'm working with, you're looking for the consistency of the grains and stability, and making sure that you're not going to start carving and have something spalled off on you.
Can you tell our audience members who are joining us, thank you all so much for joining us, can you tell them a little bit more about your process? Is it someone comes to you, or you start creating a stone and they lay out a particular design, and then what goes into the carving process as well?
If it's a historic stone, what I'll do is I'll gather, a lot of times they're either barely readable or pieces are missing. I'll gather as much information as I can. I work a lot with historians and somebody else that's pretty much an expert on carvers of the past. So what I'll do is I'll gather the information, try to get everything that was original on the original stone, the design, the lettering, send what information I have to the woman who's an expert on carvers. She's pretty good. She could tell me it was carved by so-and-so, and I'll try to find other examples of his work and compare the lettering, so that now I know I'm doing an accurate job of restoring the lettering and whatever his design was for. I keep using willow and urn for design, but for example, but if it was a willow and urn, I could see how he makes them generally, and gives me a better idea. Then locating the stone. Most of the brown stone, you can't get it anymore. From Portland quarries closed down, so most of it is reclaimed. A lot of it comes from old bridge blocks, and I bring them to a fabrication shop. They'll slice them. Say, for example, the stone is 2 inches thick. They'll slice it for me, and then I'll bring it back to my shop. I'll shape it the best I can to match the original, and then shape it by hand. Then I lay out the design on it. Whether it's going to have a winged cherub or floral designs, whatever it may be, and then the lettering, and then I start carving it. But there's a lot of research involved.
It sounds like it. It's fascinating. I know that there are definitely some stones in the cemeteries that we do tours of in Westport that definitely could use some stones. Now, do you ever modify the stone from its original? For example, you said some of the stones, if it was 2 inches thick, you would make it 2 inches thick. Do you ever make them a bit thicker or change their structure just so that they aren't as apt to break or have damage to them?
I do on brownstone. Oftentimes, it's a difficult time finding a large enough piece. And as a tablet stone, it would be set in the ground at least a third of its height, of its total length. A lot of times you may not have that option, so I would make a base slightly below grade, a socket base, and set it in there. So I'll modify it that way. Sometimes I'll go a little thicker. If I find a slab of brownstone and it's 3 inches thick versus 2 inches, the original was 2 inches, I'll go with the 3-inch. Another cemetery that I do work for, they have quite a bit of marble right along the highway entrance, and you get a lot of mist, salt mist from the road salt, which pretty much destroyed them. So a lot of them I replace with granite. You try to be as accurate as you can to match the original. But in a situation like that, if I put marble back in its place 10 years from now, we're going to have the same problem.
Yeah, preservation is definitely something that we think about when we're preserving our own collection. And I know that we have at least a headstone in our collection. So I'm glad to hear that plays a big part in your work. Are there techniques that you'd like to learn or know more about from these past artisans?
You hit the nail on the head. The past artisans. If I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and see how a lot of that was done. A lot of that was lost. A lot of the techniques they used are long gone. Nobody knows them, and including myself. So I'd like to go in the past and kind of see how things were done, learn from them guys.
And why do you think it's important to preserve or replace these stones? And partly also the craft of making them. I mean, you've learned your technique from doing it yourself, but what is the use in even relearning these skills?
Well, I mean, it would be a shame it would be a whole trade lost. It would be a whole trade lost, and then if somebody were to want to, replicate a stone, they wouldn't be able to. I mean, this isn't something you're going to do with modern technology with sandblasting, or I'm sure you're not going to put in a whole CNC program for one brownstone. No, I think it's just like any other trade. The trades are kind of dwindling away and becoming lost arts. And masonry, not to change the subject, but my last 5 years of masonry, I couldn't find helpers to stay. Where a decade ago, I mean, I pretty much had a list of, okay, if this one doesn't work out, I'll call the next guy, but nobody wants to learn this. The work is hard, and I think there was a big push for, well, don't work hard, go to school, stay in school, go to college. Don't, nobody wants to do the trades anymore.
There's definitely a place that's needed for these artisans. We see that with a lot of trades from the past, whether it's weaving baskets or textiles, or whether it's building historic homes or masonry and things like this. So I'm glad to hear that there's still this need and this want to preserve this craft. I think the work is wonderful.
I definitely enjoy it. I definitely enjoy what I do, and some of what I do is volunteer. Like I don't know if you were on my Facebook page. I have 4 brownstones that I purchased. A brownstone, I was able to find it, so I said, well, you know what? I'm going to do a little program on. I picked 4 stones that needed to be replaced, and I'm doing them and inviting the public to come on Saturdays and watch me carve them and see the process.
Fabulous. So we do have some questions from our audience.
Okay.
One of them is, who is typically seeking stones that you make?
Who is what?
Who is usually looking for a stone? Is it an organization, private individuals?
A little bit of both. There's, I won't say the name of the cemetery, but there's one cemetery in particular it's an ongoing restoration for about the last 7 years. It's it's a modern cemetery that has old sections, so they'll take a small portion of their money from the new burials and invest that into restoration and preservation on the older section of the cemetery. That's one. A lot of people do in genealogy. They'll look up, well, that's my third great grandfather. His stone fell apart. I know what it says from a 20-year-old picture. Could you replicate it? So a lot of people do in their genealogy, and then sometimes historical societies. Well, this person was an important member and or a founder of the town, for example. The stone is in bad shape. Could we make a new one, replacement for it?
Another audience question is, what areas have you worked in? Is it mostly Connecticut? Do you go outside of Connecticut?
As far as historic restoration, a lot of my work is in New York and Rhode Island. Believe it or not, I'm some in Connecticut, but most of it is in New York and Rhode Island, a little bit in Massachusetts. And as far as my custom stones, the ones that I make for clients, they're all the way out as far as Michigan.
We do have.
Oh, I got you. Okay, never mind. I thought I lost you for a second.
Nope. We have one of our audience members says they love your work. They're so excited. Another says, as a genealogist, I hunt out ancestors in cemeteries for my own family as well as others. I hate the feeling of seeing a paper record for a burial and not finding the headstone. They say, I really appreciate what you're doing and love that you do it. And they actually call you a superhero.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
And then we also have another question. Is there a specific motif or design that you like to carve?
I kind of like to spice things up a little bit. I kind of like the challenge of, one of the challenges is if somebody is known for a certain style or a certain style lettering, maybe scripted lettering or a wing cherub, and to replicate that's a challenge in itself. So I kind of like to spice things up a little bit. I do like a willow and Erna marble. They're always fun.
I really, really love the old headstones from the 17th century with their tablet and the skull with wings, the death head. I always love those stones. I think they're beautiful. We have some of those in Westport. Not too many, but a couple. And then the last question that I have right now from our audience is, out of all of the projects that you've worked on, without naming names, what is your favorite?
That's a tough one. I would say you know what? That's a really tough one. I'm actually doing one now that might take the cake. It's for two little girls from the 1700s. I kind of had the freedom to do my own design on the stone based on what a relative of their stone that was placed nearby looks like. So could be that one, could be another one. Somebody sent me a picture. This was for a modern headstone. They sent me a picture and asked me to carve and raise relief the whole scene with the boat and mountain and clouds. And so I don't know. I have a few. I can't really pinpoint one.
That last one sounds really, really unique.
Oh, it is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun doing it.
Yeah. We do have another question here that says, how do you ship a stone to these distant locations, and what kind of process and how difficult is it to get the stone?
If it's somewhere, a couple states away, I'll deliver it. Other states away, people have somebody come down to my shop. They send somebody, a trucking company, and it's all palleted up and shrink wrapped and put on the truck and shipped to them.
And we have a few more questions here.
Okay, no problem.
One of them, do you ever volunteer to do work of stones of forgotten people or unknown people?
Absolutely. Plymouth Burying Ground last year, what I did was last year I did a few events where I was carving a brownstone, same 17th, 16th century or 17th century style. And I did a lot of the symbols with the candle being wicked out, the winged cherub, bunch of different symbols. And at the end, I said, well, everybody's like, well, what are you gonna do? You could probably get a good amount of money for that. I'm like, no. I said, you know what? A lot of the work I did in Plymouth Burying Ground, we discovered there was a whole area that was unmarked burials. We, you know, so I donated that stone to the burying ground and marked, and carved to all the unknown and unmarked, just to kind of give them some kind of representation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I think this is scrolling through and reading all of these comments. I think the last question that I see at the moment is, do you know what any of the symbols on these headstones mean?
A lot of them have more than one, could have more than one meaning, but I know the majority of them. I incorporate some of the old New England styles into some of my modern work. And I always make sure that I do plenty of research on the symbols before I use them. So I do know a lot what the majority of them mean.
I know some of them from our tours. I know a few of them. What could you give us an example for our audience, specifically maybe of the willow and urn?
Willow and urn is mourning, and the urn could have multiple meanings. It goes all the way back to Roman times, and I don't want to say too much because I don't have it memorized that much, so I don't want to make a fool of myself. But the willows are represent mourning. Somebody's in mourning.
I think a lot of the imagery, especially on the later stones, I think in probably the 19th century, have a lot to do with mourning imagery. A lot of the flowers, a lot of the urns and the trees. There are all kinds of different images that can appear on those stones, but most of them have something to do with sadness or mourning or of the individual themselves. So that's
exactly. A lot of the flowers, I actually do a lot of flower carvings. A lot of them, do have different flowers mean different things. Even a rose that's a bud is usually a child. Rose that's in bloom is usually somebody lived a full life. And there's a lot of different meanings.
Well, if anyone has any other questions, we do again encourage you to either put them in the chat or the Q&A section here. If you don't have a chance to enter your question here live, you can always post it on our Facebook recording, and we are always going back and answering these questions. Even after we've gone live, we can always send an email back to Michael or look through our research. Sure. So we're always happy to answer any other questions that anyone has. Do you have a good way for people to contact you, Michael? Is it best to go through Facebook?
I do have 2 Facebook pages, Angelicola Masonry, spelled just like my last name, the Masonry, and Historic Stone Carving, where you can see some of my work there, or my email, angelicola@yahoo.com.
I will have those linked down below in our description of the video. You can always get in touch with Michael there. I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Michael, for joining us this evening and shedding a little bit of light onto the way that your craft works.
Oh, my pleasure.
Of course. So I don't think we have any other questions. Again, if you think of any more, please post them below. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us, Michael, and have a great evening, everyone.
Okay, happy week. Have a good weekend, everyone.